So the transfer portal continues to be such a dominating storyline in college football, and this weekend will have done nothing to have changed that because there were multiple big moves in the transfer portal, but today we need to break down three of those moves because in my opinion, college football needs to be aware of these moves because these could be impact additions and we need to break it all down. Before we do, as always, y'all know the drill. I need to hear from you. Hop down to the comments, Y for yes, N for no, and given all the attention the transfer portal has received, do you believe it's only a matter of time before the NCAA puts more stringent regulation on the transfer portal? And let me know what you're thinking. If you are new to the channel, be sure to subscribe. Hit that bell notification as I do constant college football content. You don't want to miss any of it. And if you enjoyed the content, like and comment down below. Those interactions are massive. But having said all of that, let's go ahead and jump into this because it seems like every week we sit down and talk about the major moves in the transfer portal, and it's become something I really look forward to. And I'm actually very excited to talk about these three moves. And we need to start in Nebraska, where the Cornhuskers add in a former Alabama Crimson Tide safety in Kane Williams. A former top 200 player in all of high school football, Kane Williams is a physical safety prospect. And even though he may not have the experience that so many coaches crave when they're looking at players in the transfer portal, he has something that may be nearly as valuable, and that's being coached by Nick Saban. Look, we know what Nick Saban does with defense. We especially know what Nick Saban does with defensive backs. So if you can get in a defensive back that was a blue chip prospect coming out of high school that has spent time in a room competing with the Alabama defensive backs and being coached by Nick Saban, you really like what you're getting because you have full faith that the coaching he's received is really, really strong coaching. And when we look at this, Nebraska has done great work in the transfer portal, but especially the moves they've made here recently. Nebraska's defense last year was the strength of that unit. And if we really go back and break down Nebraska's season, that was a team that if some things had gone differently, they could have won a few more games. And I think they're a team that's looking to make strides this year, and the wins they've gotten in the transfer portal are sure to help them do it. Now, I'm not saying they're going to win a Big Ten championship. I'm certainly not saying they're going to win a college football playoff game. What I am saying and what I am asking for out of the Cornhuskers is to be a team that plays with pride and to be a team that plays with a pulse. And I'm sure that these moves out the transfer portal are going to put them on that direction. And let's break some of them down because I have a little bit of a working theory with Nebraska's transfer portal wins, and allow me to explain. Casey Thompson was such a fantastic win for the Nebraska Cornhuskers, but every single addition they've had thereafter has only maximized the importance of Casey Thompson. Because when we look at Nebraska, we knew that when they got in Casey Thompson, someone who had a lot of positive experience, and sure, Casey Thompson might catch some flack, but a lot of the flack, if anybody is blaming him for Texas's season last year, they need to really pay attention to that offensive line. Casey Thompson did not have an offensive line to work with, and so for him to do what he did was impressive enough. Now he introduces his talents to Nebraska, something that the Nebraska Cornhusker fan base were very excited about. But what about the team outside of Casey Thompson? We talk about how that defense was the strong portion for Nebraska last year, but what we also need to recognize is the veteran presence that defense relied on that they no longer have in the same amount of numbers. So what do? Well, you add in an O'Shawn Mathis, someone who comes from TCU who did put up big numbers in the Big 12 and was coached by another prominent defensive-minded head coach in Gary Patterson. What else do? You add in a Kane Williams, a safety who, even though he may not have the experience, was a blue chip prospect coming out of high school and has only been coached by Nick Saban. That right there makes up for a lot of experience that you may be looking for elsewhere. And so what I mean when I say that every move they make outside of the Casey Thompson win only maximizes the Casey Thompson win, I think I can put it simply like this. Whenever they got Casey Thompson, that answered one question, but there were still several other questions to be answered. And inevitably, we're not going to 100% know these answers until a down of football is played. But what we can do is have some semblance of an answer right now. Once they got Casey Thompson, that was a question answered, but there were still several other questions. Every move they've gotten after has answered a question, and it's only gone to paint a picture that gives the Nebraska faithful faith. And that's why I say the Casey Thompson move is huge, and every move they make thereafter only makes that Casey Thompson move bigger. I'm really excited to see what the Nebraska Cornhuskers are going to be this season. I think they could be an improved team, but we also need to realize Scott Frost's job may just rely on them being an improved team. But we talked about a player leaving the SEC. What about a player entering the SEC? And Ole Miss has been as fruitful in the transfer portal as anybody. I mean, seriously, go take a look at their list. But they got an addition this weekend that may be as impactful as any of them. And that's saying something considering they got one of the best quarterbacks in the transfer portal, Jackson Dart. But this move in Jaylon Robinson ranks right up there. And why is that? Because Jaylon Robinson gives you a ton of proven production. You know what this guy is. He is a home run caliber wide receiver. He's someone that if you give him a drag route, you could look up and he could be taking it 75 yards to the house and nobody's going to bat an eyelash. He's got big playability. He's got the ability to stretch the field, but he also keeps a defense honest in his ability to take a short route and take it the distance. Jaylon Robinson might not be the tallest wide receiver, but he plays well above his height and impact. He's someone that Lane Kiffin is going to be very excited to utilize. And any questions we may have had about Lane Kiffin's offense, though they may still remain, this is a great way to answer a lot of them. If you're wondering what are they going to do on the outside, well, Jaylon Robinson is a wide receiver that comes in accounting for almost 18 yards per reception. That right there should scare people, especially when we're talking about who the head coach is. Lane Kiffin. Lane is inevitably going to put Jaylon Robinson in a position to succeed, and I understand. There's going to be a massive jump in skill between what Jaylon Robinson was facing before and what he's currently going to be facing in the SEC. But at the end of the day, if you're a wide receiver, if you can run a route, you can run a route. If you can catch the ball, you can catch the ball. Sure, a defensive back is going to try and get you off your spot, and they're going to be able to affect you at some level. But there are some things that you either have or you don't. And the reason I think Jaylon Robinson is going to be successful is he has those things. So now it's just the finite details, the reps that are going to be needed for him to adjust to the speed of the SEC. But everything outside of that, he has. And I'm really intrigued to see how Lane Kiffin is going to be utilizing a weapon such as this, because he could get involved in multiple different facets of the game, and I think we're going to hear his name quite often. So that's why he had to have been included in this video. If we're talking about offensive minds, Lane Kiffin is near the top in college football. And so for this move right here, great move for Ole Miss as they continue to stockpile talent. But if we're talking about stockpiling talent, goodness gracious, USC has had win after win after win in the transfer portal, and they continue it this weekend, grabbing another player from the University of Washington in Jacoby Covington. And this right here is something that I know USC fans are going to be excited about. There's been a lot of questions for USC, not about the offense. People around college football have faith that at some point or another, that's going to be figured out. When you look at Caleb Williams, when you look at some of the offensive weapons they've gotten, and inevitably Lincoln Riley, we have complete faith that the offense for the USC Trojans is going to be just fine. But what about the defense? What's that going to look like? But if you continue to get in moves such as this, that's going to help start to answer some of those questions. Once again, I've said it for the previous two destinations, I have to say it here. We cannot say for certain until a game is played. We can only talk about what's being answered on paper. But if we're talking about what's being answered on paper, my goodness me, USC has had a great offseason in the transfer portal. And what are they getting out of Jacoby Covington? Well, another individual who may not have gotten the experience that so many coaches crave in the transfer portal, but much like Kane Williams, was a part of a secondary that had a lot of talent in front of him, and he was coached by Jimmy Lake. Jimmy Lake, even though he's no longer at Washington, has coached multiple top-tier defensive backs. So whenever he has his name attached to a prospect, you have some level of faith that that's a guy who's received really adequate coaching. He's also someone who possesses great length for a defensive back, 6'2", and that's going to be the name of the game. Look, if you can get these defensive backs that have that speed, but also possess that length, that's something that every defensive coordinator in the nation is going to be looking for. And USC already has a need at secondary. Damani Jackson was one of the nation's best players, but you need to surround him with talent so that way he can maximize his ability. One way you do that is by going out and getting an individual such as Jacoby Covington. And even though Covington may not have played a whole lot for Washington, that didn't mean that this wasn't an individual that the Washington faithful were really expecting to step up this next year. This was a name that many people were pegging as a guy that was going to come in, step up, and show how high his ceiling was. Inevitably, that's not going to be the case as he's going to be playing for USC, but now it gives him the opportunity to show how high his ceiling is at USC. And if he's to come in and develop, this could be a big win for the USC Trojans. I already think it is a big win, but when we look at the totality of circumstances for USC, I can make the same exact argument I started this video with for Nebraska, that every move USC makes outside of the Caleb Williams moves only highlights the importance of Caleb Williams, because now you're starting to answer all of these questions, and then you look back to the most important position on the field, your quarterback, and you see an individual that you have immense faith in. And it's only going to highlight the importance of every move they made thereafter. But because of that, I'm really interested in hearing from all of you. Hop down to the comments, let me know what you're thinking about all of these moves out the transfer portal. That's it. See ya.